Here we're talking about something that's also very close to our hearts. Now, when we look at the way how travel has, in a way, transformed the way we probably look forward to our next vacation, or for that matter, that stay, it's important to understand that somewhere or the other with the pandemic, it is true when we say that the travel recovery has become a travel revolution. Now, when I say the word travel, I'm sure one of the first names that comes to your mind is also to do with Airbnb. When it got started in 2007, it was a strange scenario where people would wonder if they would open their doors to strangers. And today, it's pretty much seen, the kind of shift towards whole homes that's brought about even meaningful economic benefits, both for the hosts and the communities. And it's seen more as an alternative accommodation that is gaining mainstream acceptance. However, with the pandemic, there has been a lot of changes that have taken place, which is why let's try to understand more about it. And in the perspective, in the umbrella under tourism, riding the recovery wave. We're going to have the conversation with none other than Nathan Blecharczyk, who's the co-founder, chief strategy officer, Airbnb, and he'll be in conversation with Vinod Mahanta, senior editor at the Economic Times. Now, Nathan, in fact, is playing a leading role in driving key strategic initiatives across the global business, particularly those that require a combined understanding of the business, the product, or for that matter, data. And recently, he also oversaw the creation of Airbnb City Portal, an industry-first software solution that addresses the needs of cities relating to short-term rentals. So it looks like it's a pretty exciting way ahead for Nathan in terms of what potential we can see with regard to Airbnb. But first up, let's try to understand with regard to this very important topic that's also sitting on our minds, which is to do with the recovery wave, especially in tourism. So let's deep dive into another interesting conversation featuring Nathan Blecharczyk, and we have with us Vinod Mahanta. Here we go.
Thanks so much, Kavya. Nate, welcome to Global Business Summit 2022.
My pleasure to be here.
So in this environment of doom and gloom, let me start on a positive note. I understand you have some news to share with us.
Yes, I'm very excited to be able to share that we will be opening a technology hub in the city of Bengaluru. Obviously, a city well known as a technology capital of the world. And we couldn't be more excited to benefit from being a part of this ecosystem and also giving back. We hope that this year we'll hire more than 100 high-tech jobs, and beyond just tapping into the local talent and offering high-paying jobs. I hope we can bring our culture of innovation and bring that to the ecosystem and contribute it to the reputation of Bengaluru for having some of the hottest companies, startups based there. So couldn't be more excited to open this hub. I also think this is going to be very important as we serve India even better. It's a very important market for us. Obviously, 1.3 billion people is a huge opportunity for growth, but also in this specific time, as we exit the pandemic, knock on wood, I think we're going to see a rebound in tourism. Tourism is really important to different local markets, different parts of India. And we couldn't be more excited to partner with the local governments across India, leveraging our local teams to better localize Airbnb in their markets. So very pleased to share this today.
Thank you so much. Did you expect that idea to catch on and be so successful?
Well, this is the first time we've seen something like this happen. What's happening is that people from around the world are booking homes on Airbnb in Ukraine for stays, next month, soon, that they don't have any intention of actually traveling to Ukraine, but their intent is basically to give money directly to other people whom they found on the Airbnb platform. Again, these hosts are not soliciting. This is really an upswell of kindness amongst guests around the world wanting to help out, wanting to contribute. Again, we've never seen this before. In the last 24 hours, there's been about 1.5 million US dollars gifted on the platform. So a significant amount of money in a small window of time. This is one thing that's happening. In parallel to that, we've made a commitment, Airbnb, to house 100,000 refugees from Ukraine over the coming months. What that means is that Airbnb and Airbnb.org and donors to Airbnb.org are contributing funds to help pay for this. And also hosts on the Airbnb platform are opening up their homes, some free of charge, others at a discounted rate to help house refugees from Ukraine. And so it really is a nice effort between Airbnb, donors to Airbnb.org, and our host community to really do whatever we can to help out during this tragic time of need.
I mean, it's a great example of innovation through community.
Yeah, and the idea you referenced about guests giving money to hosts, again, completely organic, surprised us. And the other idea that we're doing, which is housing refugees, this is an idea that was born actually way back in 2012 on Twitter. We saw one of our hosts in 2012 during a hurricane in New York City offer up her home free of charge to local New Yorkers who might need a place to stay during the storm. And we were so impressed of her generosity that we thought to ourselves, maybe there are other New Yorkers who want to do the same thing. So we created a platform where people could list their spaces free of charge. And sure enough, within 24 hours, 1,000 people opened up their homes. So that was an incredible one-off inspired by the community. Over the years, we've improved that functionality and we've made it available. Most recently, as Afghans have left Afghanistan in August, we've housed more than 20,000 of them, helped them find their permanent housing, but in the interim period, housed them. And so we've really built up an incredible capability to do this, and we're happy to make it available during this terrible tragedy in Ukraine.
These initiatives also tie in very well with the company's purpose, creating a world where anyone can belong anywhere. I mean, it's something that's very unique for a for-profit business. What's the company's philosophy behind such initiatives? I mean, very few people, very few companies put a brand promise to action in such a way.
Well, I'm an engineer, but my two co-founders are designers. And together we make quite the team. But as a result of their background, we bring a lot of design thinking into the company. And we're very philosophical about, our purpose and principles. And, I think even from the early days of the company, we would ask ourselves, what impact do we want to have on the world? And it's a question we continually ask ourselves. We also think a lot about our various stakeholders. For us, that's our guests, it's our hosts, our employees, the communities in which we operate, and of course, our investors. We have 5 stakeholders. And everything we do, we think about how are we, Airbnb, positively impacting these 5 stakeholders. So we're constantly looking for ways to create value, do good. I think we're just inherently optimists and really, I think, ambitious optimists, trying to think about how can we create value for all these stakeholders and be really self-aware about what we're doing in the world. So these are some of the kind of motivators that I think have helped us to achieve some of these acts.
Sure. But in your view, do you think that the Ukraine-Russia conflict will set back recovery in the global homestay business? The things was just starting to pick up, and there's summer coming up.
Was the question, how do I think this will impact travel this summer?
Yes.
I think it's really early to tell. All of this has played out in a span of a couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, no one would have predicted where we're at. I'm an optimist. I hope things will take a turn, for the better. So far this conflict has been, in a focused geography. Obviously, we're seeing the impacts of it broadly in terms of fuel prices, refugees, et cetera. I think one thing we've learned from the pandemic, though, is that there is this appetite to travel. There is this need to connect. Many of us have not been able to connect in the way that we've wanted to over the last 2 years. And so there is this pent up demand. Now, how that is realized, how that plays out in terms of travel is to be seen. But I think what we've learned at Airbnb is that we can adapt even as consumer behavior changes quickly. I think, one, there's an inherent adaptability to our platform. The fact that we have homes, not just in cities, but in rural areas, so that we can meet the demand wherever it wants to go, even if it wants to stay domestically. And we've tried to lean in to what consumers want in the moment. So over the last year, we've launched more than 150 product features really aimed at what consumers want right now. One of the most important of which is something we call flexible search. So we've seen that during the pandemic with people working remotely, that they are more flexible with their travel dates because they can work from anywhere. So we launched this tool, I'm Flexible. You can basically search and find a place to stay without specifying specific dates. So you can say something like, I want a place to stay for 1 week. I don't care exactly when I arrive. I just want to stay for a week or a month or whatever the duration may be. It's a very powerful tool, and actually no other travel sites have anything quite like it. And since we've launched it, we've seen more than 800 million searches happen with our flexible dates search tool. Another feature we launched just recently is verified Wi-Fi. So we know a lot of people are on Zoom, just like I am right now. And for that to go well, you need a good internet connection. But to have confidence in the internet connection, you really need to measure the speed. And so we now have a tool where hosts can certify the results of their internet connection, and guests can see that before they book. So these are just two small examples of how we've innovated and stayed really agile, picking up on what do consumers want during a time of great change. And that will be our strategy going forward too. As we expect travel to keep changing, we're going to be very responsive to it.
I was looking at the Airbnb numbers. You've beaten Wall Street estimate on revenues and earnings in the fourth quarter. You anticipate the reserved nights and experiences in the first quarter of this year to significantly exceed quarter one 2019 levels. What would you attribute this dramatic recovery to?
Well, I think there's a few things going on. Certainly, there's pent-up demand to travel as borders open up again. And so that's a great tailwind. But I think what we've seen is during the pandemic, travel has fundamentally changed. And because people have increased flexibility, not all people, but many people have the ability to work from Zoom. What that means is you can now not just work from home, but you can work from any home. So this idea of living, traveling, and working is all getting kind of commingled. And it means that you can now take a long weekend and travel while working. It also means you could go for a month or longer. And so we've actually seen a real explosion in terms of the length of stay, how long people are traveling for. I have a few stats to illustrate this. One stat is that in 2021, 175,000 guests booked stays lasting more than 3 months. All right, so hundreds of thousands of people are using Airbnb to stay for more than a quarter of the year, right? At a single place, okay, not just hopping around, but at a single place. In Q4, 1 in 5 nights booked on Airbnb was for stays of 28 days or more. So I think when you think about Airbnb, you normally think about someone staying for a few nights, much like you might in a hotel. But the reality that we're seeing on the platform is that so many people are staying for longer stays. In Q4, half of the nights booked were for stays of 7 nights or longer. So this just kind of gives you a sense of, how much kind of longer stay activity we're seeing. Also, because people haven't been going cross-border, they've been traveling domestically. And when they travel domestically, they've been biased towards rural areas as opposed to cities. And again, Airbnb has homes not just in cities, but plenty in rural areas too. And so in fact, during the pandemic, we've seen travelers go to places they've never gone to before on Airbnb. In fact, in the last year, travelers have gone to 6,000 cities globally that they had never before been to using Airbnb. And so, we've seen a huge shift in consumer behavior. And I think Airbnb has inherently been able to meet that need based on it being a platform and having so many different types of inventory, types of homes in different locations. And then the fact that we've remained agile, we've leaned into what consumers want, we've customized our functionality, that product flexible search I was just mentioning, verified Wi-Fi, these are all features designed to meet the needs of the times. So I think this is really what's propelling our financial performance.
We've seen 2 black swan events within 2 years. As chief strategy officer, are you still making 3 to 5 year strategic plans, or it's more tactical now?
Yes, it's very difficult to predict the future. I think we're just focused on what people need right now. I think one of the things we realized during the pandemic as well was to focus on what makes Airbnb unique, right? And that is our hosts, right? So we really kind of got back to basics, and instead of going off in too many different directions and investing in too many new ideas, we said, you know what, our core business is what people need right now. It's a great business, and there's a lot of opportunity there. And so we've really, over the course of the pandemic, doubled down on meeting the needs of everyday hosts and the travelers who also stay with our hosts. And we think that's an opportunity that's going to continue to grow over the next many years. So as we think 3 to 5 years out, we don't think there's a shelf life to our core business. We think there's plenty of headroom there to grow. After all, globally, we only have 4 million hosts, right? 4 million might sound like a lot, but there are, at least 7 billion people on this planet. And we think a lot of them could be hosts. So we think 4 million is a very small number in the grand scheme of things. And we're excited to focus on growing that in the years to come and building a much bigger business that way.
Sure. One of the things that I really like about your company is that it still does startup things even after 14 years. I mean, Brian decided to live as an Airbnb guest for an undefined period of time. How is that experiment going? I mean, what are the key learnings? And what set it off?
Yeah, well, look, Joe, Brian, and I have always believed in staying close to the user experience. And so during this time when travel is changing, and we believe that people can live, work, and travel all at the same time, Brian wanted to live that experience himself. And out of that comes 2 things, I think. One, of course, is a lot of tactical observations about bugs in the product, and he can go to the team and say, hey, look, why haven't we fixed this thing? But in a bigger, more strategic sense, I think it's helping us all to understand, what do you need when you're staying, not just for a week or a few days, but when you're really living on the platform? And what do you need in order to effectively connect with people when you're becoming not just a tourist or a visitor, but you're really becoming a longer term kind of resident of an area? How can you effectively plug in and discover the local spots, establish routines, meet people? So I think there's a lot to explore in terms of the experience and understanding the needs of these this new age of travelers. And it really goes back to our roots, right? We started this company by solving our own problem. We are simply trying to pay the rent one weekend. And to do that, we set up airbeds and we hosted 3 designers who were in town for a conference, and it was to pay the rent. Fast forward a couple of years, and as we were launching Airbnb, the primary problem we were trying to overcome was trust. How can you trust a stranger? And one of the ways we solved that problem was facilitating the payments, because we knew that payments is really important for trust. How did we come up with that idea? It was actually by Brian using the product. The funny story is that he, in the early days, used the product one weekend to go to Austin to a conference. And he stayed with a host on an airbed. It was a beautiful experience. The host cooked him dinner. But at the end of the night, the host asked Brian, do you have the money? Because back then we didn't facilitate payments. You basically paid upon arrival. But that night, Brian didn't have the money. But he explained to the host, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. And the host said, hey, no problem. So the next night, the host asked Brian again, do you have the money? And Brian said, no, I forgot to go to the ATM today. Can I bring it to you tomorrow? And at this point, things got awkward. The host was wondering to himself, who is this guy that I've met over the internet sleeping in my living room who keeps forgetting to pay me? And it was based on that experience that we thought to ourselves, maybe we should facilitate the payments up front. Maybe that would make a better user experience. So the reason we facilitate payments is not to create a business model, but it was to solve a user experience problem that we first discovered by using the product ourselves. So this tells you a little bit about our approach, that we really try to live the user experience. Even now, after 14 years, and after all our success, we still want to be on the front lines, getting that firsthand feedback and drawing inspiration from our community.
Brian is back on the airbed. Something great is going to come up again.
I'm sure of it. You know, he has stories every week to share. So yes, without a doubt.
So one of the things, I was speaking to Glenn Fogel yesterday, and I see after chatting with various platforms is that there is a race to be an end-to-end service provider for travelers. Different people are approaching the same problem in a different way. Where do you stand today in that journey of being an end-to-end travel platform?
Well, it's certainly something that we aspire towards, and we had a lot of various projects going on before the pandemic. Now, the pandemic caused us to think carefully about what's most important to us right now. Obviously, the pandemic hit us hard. We saw our revenue drop 80% in the span of 2 weeks, and we had to make some trade-offs. We couldn't do the same things we've been doing before. And that's when we decided to double down on what makes us different, which is the fact that we have hosts. We have ordinary people who are providing just exceptional hospitality, whether it's by sharing their homes or offering experiences or giving recommendations. These are things that hosts do uniquely well, and we're the largest platform by far that has hosts. And so we decided that during the pandemic, we were going to double down on our hosts, and that this is really an opportunity that we've only just begun to crack. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we have 4 million hosts today, but we think we could have many millions more. And so we think this is still a under-tapped opportunity that we're focused on pursuing. I think that as we think about the end-to-end platform, we're going to make sure that we think about approaching it in a way that leverages our differentiation, right? So everything we do is really host-led. And as we think about the travel sector, much like with homes, we didn't, become an OTA offering hotels. We didn't take the formula that was already out there off the shelf and re-implement it. We really approached it from a different angle and created a new category. So that is our general approach to innovation. And I think, it's part of also our kind of goal to be one of the most creative companies on the planet, holding ourselves to that kind of standard when we think about going into new business opportunities.
Sure. I think we've run out of time. One last question before I let you go. What has been the biggest learning as a leader during the last 2 years? And you've been through I think 2 Black Swan events.
Well, a few things. First off, communication is really important, during a crisis. And so, communicating with our employees about, what's happening, how we're going to navigate this, because everyone's, afraid. But also communicating with our stakeholders, right? And our stakeholders include our guests, our hosts, our employees, of course, the communities in which we operate, and our investors. And for each of these, we thought to ourselves, what can we do for each stakeholder? What do they need in this time of need? How can we partner? So with communities, for example, during the pandemic, we knew that there was a lot of needs for doctors, in cities, particularly in the early days of the pandemic. So we created this program called Frontline Stays that could house doctors kind of free of charge in the early days of the pandemic. Later in the pandemic, when we saw that people were open to traveling to rural areas, we partnered with local governments to encourage tourism to those areas, because that was a much needed economic opportunity. at the time. So I guess, you know, what we learned was that during a pandemic or a crisis, there are many stakeholders who are having their own challenges. And it's important to think about each of them and what their needs are and how you might work together to benefit both parties. You know, I think that's probably a lesson that could apply to any leader, any business.
Thank you so much for sparing time out of the busy schedule and doing this interview with us.
I'm so glad I could join you. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.